You may not all know this, but it's pretty apparent to me now that I'm spending most of my time out in D.C. North Dakota is pretty fortunate with both of our senators. They both have a reputation of working across the aisle to the degree that there are moderates anywhere in Congress. I would describe John Hoeven and Heidi Heitkamp both in that category. And there's probably just a tiny handful that I would put in that category. So we are really quite fortunate to have both members of the Senate sitting on the Ag Committee and both in a position to work well across the aisle with the other party. Most states can't say that, and so we're in a good spot that way. The second thing I need to do is, just like you heard both of these guys spend a lot of time praising their bosses. There are several of my bosses that are in the room today, and I'd like to have them be recognized. My bosses is the board of directors who are all the state presidents around the country. Mark Watney, North Dakota Farmers Union president down here. Doug Somke, South Dakota Farmers Union president over against the wall. Gary Werdish, Minnesota Farmers Union president, way in the back corner. Sitting next to Gary, who's sort of the new guy on the block here, is our general counsel, Dave Velde. I don't know if there's a reason for the two of them to be sitting next together, but it always makes me nervous when our attorney's sitting next to anybody, honestly. So thank you for that. Now, the last sort of comment I want to make before I do the PowerPoint is that it's our goal with this presentation to sort of give a big picture view. You're going to have a whole bunch of more detailed presentations as the day goes on. So what I tried to do with this PowerPoint is to sort of give some big picture views of what this Farm Bill is going to face. And then we're going to hopefully have plenty of time here for Q&A, and we'll figure out what happens when the sirens go off. So, the political climate, first of all. We don't know a lot about President Trump and his view on agriculture. Because it was an unusual campaign. There really wasn't much on his website in terms of farm policy. But what we do know is that he supports strong farm policies. Those are direct language taken out of what he said during the campaign. He's a protector of the renewable fuel standard, which is, for anyone in agriculture, whether you raise corn or not, it's enormously important, because that extra demand for corn, if that were to evaporate, the prices for everything else would go so deep in the toilet, I'm not sure that they could ever be pulled back out. So that's a really big deal. Unfortunately, what we've seen as he's sort of beginning to staff up, and it's late by conventional standards, is we're seeing a lot of heritage action kind of people. And so while that's concerning, on the other hand, if you want to think positively about it, farm bills are not written in the White House. They're written by Congress. And so we'll see how that interaction is. My guess is that the White House is sort of looking for some wins here as well. And I think there's going to be enormous political pressure to get this farm bill done on time. All these members of Congress are going to be up on the House side, up for election, right about the time this farm bill is supposed to be completed. If it's not completed, that's a problem for anyone running. If it is, it's a feather in their cap. So I think we'll see a lot of pressure to get that done on time. Several folks have mentioned the Heritage Foundation. It's a very sort of right-wing economic group in D.C. that seems to be exercising more and more influence as the years go by. And so it's important, sort of an overall context, to kind of understand some of these bigger political winds that are buffeting what we're trying to do, whether it's Farm Bill or anything else. very conservative, very cut the budget, and cut taxes less, cut the budget even more, is sort of how you would summarize a lot of what they argue for. It would not be an economic conference without a pie chart. And this pie chart is particularly used. If you guys want to get down here so you can see this, you're certainly welcome to. I want to spend just a minute on this because it's really important to make a point here. If you look at whoops, I pushed the wrong button. If you look at I still got the wrong button. There, okay, never mind, I'm not going to point. The bottom half of that is so this is mandatory spending, the dark stuff for you guys in the back. The red stuff is discretionary spending. That's stuff that goes through appropriations. Mandatory stuff is stuff that happens based on law. It doesn't have to be reappropriated every year. And then the green chunk over there is interest, okay? So the point here is to look at the overall budget and figure out what is possible to cut, okay? The bottom half of this chart is all mandatory spending. These are all entitlement programs. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid make up just over 50% of the total budget. President Trump has said repeatedly he's not going to touch any of that. The red piece is defense spending. President Trump has said he's going to put more money in defense spending, okay? So you have, and then you have other mandatory spending off to the left of that. So more than 3/4 of the total budget is off limits or is going to get more money, okay? According to the official policies of this administration. And of the remaining chunk, this less than a quadrant here, almost half of that is interest expense. You can't do anything with it. And so it's that pink stuff in this little tiny sliver that doesn't even show is all that's left to cut. Now at the same time, we're talking about $1 trillion infrastructure spending that's going to happen, and we're going to balance the budget in 10 years. I mean, this is like not possible, folks. So what is going to happen is something different than what's being said. And maybe that's where I'll leave it. You can all figure out where that is going to end up. My guess, we're going to have a significant increase in deficit spending. I don't know any other way to sort of figure out how you put all those promises together and you look at the political lay of the land and you come to any other conclusion. But I'll be interested, Jack and others from D.C., if you share that sort of conclusion. This is the Farm Bill itself spending. So if you just take that tiny, tiny sliver from the earlier thing that is farm spending, 80% of it's nutrition. That's predominantly SNAP program, but it's school lunch programs, things of that nature as well. That's the biggest part of the Farm Bill spending by far. That is going down. Now these are the numbers as of the time when the last Farm Bill was passed. Today it's probably closer to 3/4, about 75% or something like that, because those numbers, they're entitlement spendings. So as the economy improves, the spending in that area will go down and that relative proportion will shrink. Still, it's the lion's share. The next big chunk is crop insurance. So there's a bunch of crop insurance folks in the crowd. Pay attention to that because that's where a lot of folks are going to be focusing efforts to try and make cuts. The next largest chunk is conservation programs. And then it's the commodity programs, which is ARC, PLC, that kind of stuff. So that's sort of where the money is, okay? Keep that in mind as we talk about some of these other things. I already talked a bit about Heritage Foundation. By the way, they're very, very critical of crop insurance and think that the subsidies ought to go away. You farmers are smart enough. You've got the means and the expertise to manage your own risk. You don't need the government involved. That's their argument, okay? Environmental Working Group is another one that's sort of to Tom's point. You got Heritage on the right. You got Environmental Working Group on the left. They're coming at it from a different direction. They also have their knives out for crop insurance. And then you've got, for the first time ever, the Republican National Committee. Now, this isn't going to be an issue in the Senate, but it will be in the House. The Republican Convention, Republican National Convention last summer actually passed language asking to take the nutrition programs out of the Farm Bill. Now, the degree to which members of Congress pay attention to what their party platform says, we can all have a robust debate about that. A lot of them don't. But we are in a business where margins are skinny when it comes to getting votes for things. And so if you lose a few, and this is essentially going to be written by the Republicans in the House, they're in charge, that poses a problem on the right as well. We've already talked about Sonny Perdue. We all know that he's not yet been confirmed. He will be when Congress comes back after the Easter recess. And he starts way, way, way behind. He's got budgets laying on his desk for the rest of this fiscal year, for next fiscal year. He's got a farm bill to figure out. He's got just enormous issues that have just been sort of sitting because there's no one there in charge to make some of these decisions. Now, big picture. My personal view for the last, most of my lifetime, you don't get a farm bill unless you have three big components in the farm bill. You got the farmer and rancher folks. Those are the guys, those of us who want ARC, PLC, commodity titles, crop insurance, those guys, okay? We want a farm bill. You got the conservation groups. The conservation title, that gets chopped, and you lose their support. The political base to pass a farm bill shrinks. And you got the nutrition groups. If they end up sort of opposing a farm bill, you're in a lot of trouble. If we cut that out, if we have a separate nutrition program and then a farm bill program, we're in an awful lot of trouble. We had a lot of sort of entanglements around that in the current farm bill as the House was wrestling with those issues. And the Republican Party in the House is a smaller majority today than it was back then when they had this big hullabaloo. So you've got to have those three big core groups of supporters to pass a farm bill, in my judgment. You have, and we hear this all the time, you have a Congress that's mostly urban, okay? 58% of it are, 80% or more of the people in those districts are from urban districts, okay? They have urban addresses. So those folks, the urban folks, what do they care about a farm bill? The big thing they care about it is nutrition, okay? So you can't write them off. The little red sliver, less than 8%, those are rural districts where more than half of the residents are in rural areas. And then you have the mix over there where it's both urban and rural. That's the leadership, you know that. The pay-go rule is something we're still operating under. So basically just very simple. If you're gonna spend more money in one part of the farm bill, you're gonna have to cut in another part of the farm bill. It's just somebody, either one of these guys or maybe both of them mentioned it. There is an interesting development happening that is very favorable, and that is both dairy and cotton, which are problems in the farm bill. They're a big problem that leaders are going to say have to be solved, okay? They're each going to take $1 billion or more to solve, okay? There is talk in this Congress right now to sort of do an emergency, attach something to an appropriations bill that makes them eligible for a payment. And if that happens and it's written in the right way, that gets added to the Farm Bill baseline. So that's watch carefully. If that happens, that's a big deal, because it means that relative to pay-go, if we're going to bring cotton into PLC, and well, PLC predominantly, then we maybe don't have to find $1 billion someplace else. We can't take it out of sugar because we don't spend any money on sugar. So it's got to come from other places. I'm not saying, Jack, that we would if we could. That's not my point. Okay. This is sort of going back to 1990, spending on the Farm Bill by major mandatory programs. It's been going up, okay? So keep that in mind. And the blue, so that little kind of, it's growing, but at the bottom, that's crop insurance. The light, that's nutrition at the top, so you can see that's where most of the money is being spent. Conservation's been increasing a little bit, and look what's gotten squeezed out. It's commodity programs. Now, part of that's because we just came off high price periods, and so those payments were down. I don't have to tell you that farm income is half of what it was just 3 or 4 years ago, or that farm prices are in the same spot. This is just another chart that shows the same thing. We try and do this, especially when we have audiences that aren't so full of farmers, so folks understand how dramatically important a safety net is important, especially in today's environment. This is a messy graph. It just says where ARC is being paid. The darker the color, the more the money, okay? This is ARC payments for corn. You can kind of see it kind of overlays the corn belt, right? And you got a little tiny piece in the southeastern part of North Dakota that Tom talked about. And this is the same ARC payments for soybeans. You kind of see where that spreads around the country. I don't have it for PLC because PLC is, I mean, you just know how that works. Everybody, wherever the crop is raised, if the market's gone down, the PLC payments are being made in there just in the last couple of years. This is how North Dakota and the U.S. split. So blue is ARC, red is PLC. And this is average across all commodities. So about 2/3 of the state was signed up for ARC. Just you farmers in the crowd, if you had a chance to do it today, knowing the price environment today, how many would switch from ARC to PLC? We've got 4 tender hands. How many would switch the other way? We're signed up for PLC and are going to switch to ARC. I didn't think I'd see any hands up on that. Almost certainly in the new Farm Bill, there'll be a new choice. And that's what CBO is projecting as well, that most farmers are going to switch out of ARC into PLC, particularly because we're facing a low price environment. I talked a bit about both cotton and dairy. They're both $1 billion or $1 billion+ problems. A dairy program that was put in place, almost everyone, dairy farmers would describe it as an utter failure, if you get the pun. It really was pathetic, yeah, in both ways, okay? Which is to say that there's a lot, dairy is spread all over the country, and there's going to have to be a fix in dairy, and it's going to cost a pile of money. So that's a big squeaky wheel. Cotton, big squeaky wheel. Conaway, Purdue from the south. I don't know how much cotton they raise in Georgia, probably not all that much, but certainly more than in North Dakota. Okay, this was said before, evolutionary, not revolutionary. So I think that's pretty much what I wanted to do in terms of an overview. Okay, that's the setting that we're faced with.